Hello friends and welcome into the first ever edition of Is It Good? The show where we take a look at the latest films to hit theaters and ask one very simple question. Is the film in question any good? Today we're starting off the series with a giant of a film and looking at the latest summer creature feature, this one being Meg 2: The Trench. Obviously, as the name would indicate, this film is a direct sequel to 2018's The Meg, and I'll let you know right off the bat, how you felt about the original is very likely how you're going to feel about the sequel. The plot itself is different enough from the first one, but at its heart, this is the same loud, dumb, in-your-face blockbuster that first splashed into cinemas 5 years ago. If the original Meg was your jam, you're gonna love this one. If not, well, let's get into that. I didn't love the first Meg. There were aspects of the film I liked, sure, and a lot of those positives have made a return here. The titular monster looked great in the first film, and that's certainly the case in the sequel as well. We have 3 Megs now, and they all generally look really good. Jason Statham was genuinely funny the first time out, and that hasn't changed here either, as he does a good job of switching back and forth between playing the straight man in a sea of comedic characters and being funny himself. Speaking of which, this is a pretty funny movie, even if some of the jokes are very Marvel-like and left me groaning more than laughing. So there's a lot to like here and a lot to dislike, but don't take my word for it, let's just get into the plot and see what there is to talk about. The film starts off quietly enough, establishing Jonas, Statham's character, as a champion for Mother Nature who's looking to protect the environment from greedy corporations. After this brief intro, we are then introduced to the bulk of the film's cast, and we have a couple of returning faces from the original like DJ, Mac, and Mei Ying, but there is a major loss. Li Bingbing did not reprise her role as Su Yin. Thankfully, it seems like she dropped out just due to scheduling conflicts and not due to bad blood with the studio, though you wouldn't know it considering the writers just straight up killed her character off. I guess that settles that. We also get introduced to a new rich lady who definitely, absolutely will not turn out to be the villain later, I promise. And then nothing of note happens for like the next 20 minutes. Oh, and it's also worth noting that the studio did fill Bingbing's role with another Chinese megastar, this time being Jing Wu, because remember, this series exists solely to print money in the US and China. Money made elsewhere is a bonus, not the main goal. For what it's worth, Wu is rather good in his role and turns out to be a very fun character, so I think his addition was a good decision. One of the earliest scenes with Wu's character, Juming, is how I believe you pronounce it that way, but I'm probably butchering it, so I do apologize. But anyway, one of his earliest scenes is where he free dives with a captive megalodon and... oh my gosh, okay. Okay, this scene was the first of many where I just had to choke down the stupidity that the film was feeding me. We live in a world where we can't even keep a single great white in captivity for more than a day or two without killing it, and you're telling me this guy has the tech to hold a captive Meg indefinitely? I know these movies are kind of sci-fi in nature and also very stupid, but this was a lot to wrap my head around. Anyway, Wu's character has a pet megalodon and he sometimes swims with it and he thinks he can tame it. Neat. During an expedition, Statham and the rest of the cast end up being hunted by, you guessed it, Juming's pet Meg, who broke out of her enclosure because, and I kid you not, she was horny and needed a big strong male Meg in her life. This leads to the bulk of the main cast to go down to the Forbidden Zone where all the monsters come from, and surprise! There are 2 more Megs and they have nasty Meg sex. I am so glad I paid $15 for my ticket to see this. While down in the Forbidden Zone that I can't be bothered to remember the actual name of, they find an underwater facility where an evil corporation is setting up explosives to blow the trench wide open for, reasons. They try to explain it by saying there are really cool rocks down there, like not just regular rocks, but really, really cool rocks, but the whole thing is pretty contrived. Anyway, the bad guys end up blowing the trench wide open, and in doing this, they strand our heroes at the bottom of it. While down there, a couple of characters meet horrific fates, most notably the toy-obsessed cosplayer who gets devoured by a literal kraken. Oh, believe me, we're gonna get to that in a minute. Statham and the survivors use mech suits to walk to an escape facility, and they fight a Spanish-speaking bad guy and blah blah blah. None of it's especially important. What matters for this part is that the rescue sub was sabotaged by somebody at the base, and we get a classic whodunit scenario between DJ, a fan favorite from the first film, Mac, a fan favorite from the first film, and New Girl, a completely new character who was not in the first film and who keeps making suspicious faces at the camera. You are going to be shocked when I tell you who was behind all of it. So yeah, anyway, New Girl turns out to be evil, and when the characters get back to the surface, she's taken over the research facility with a crew of weirdly muscular mercenaries. The good guys fight back, and DJ gets his time to shine in a series of genuinely funny moments that actually got a few chuckles out of me. It turns out generic bad guy, the one who speaks Spanish from earlier, is dating New Girl. This turns out to be super important because, well, it doesn't. It's not important at all, actually, because she gets eaten almost immediately by a Meg, and it's from a scene that's literally in the trailers, so I was kind of sad because I knew exactly what was going to happen because I had literally seen it despite watching the movie for the first time. So, yeah, that's something. I really hate how much modern movie trailers show, but I guess that's a rant for another time. Just, yeah, real bummer. The good guys escape the station, the Megs follow them. Yes, again, rumored there are 3 Megs in this one. And now we go to a place called Fun Island for the final act of the film. A lot happens here in pretty quick order, so I'm going to summarize as best I can. The trio of Megs and the Kraken go buck wild on everybody, and they are just eating tons of unsuspecting beachgoers. There's also a strange species of monsters unleashed from the bottom of the trench that can walk on land, but despite having evolved for millions of years at the bottom of the ocean, yeah, okay, they can walk on land, sure, great. And basically they wreak havoc on everybody that's actually on the island. Eventually, the rich evil lady gets eaten by the oxygen-breathing creatures from the bottom of the sea, all of the mercenaries die, and the scene is set for some monster versus Statham action. Statham does go on to kill one of the Megs, and what's funny about it is that I knew very early on that that was the Meg that was going to die first. It was going to be the first casualty because one is literally named and characterized, one is visually distinct, and it's so much larger than the others, and it's described as an alpha. And then there's this third one that's just, it's just there. It's just another big shark, but it's not as notable as the other two. It was always going to be the first monster to die, and there was literally zero reason to suspect otherwise. So yeah, no surprise there. Juming's pet Meg ends up killing the Kraken, and honestly, the squid monster kinda goes out like a little wimp. It's there, it eats some people, and then it's Meg food. The whole thing felt very anticlimactic. Jason Statham ends up killing the Alpha Meg with a move that I don't think is physically possible, but hey, I'm no scientist and we are way too far into this thing to start questioning the logic of it now. And then the pet Meg is about to eat our heroes, but decides to be nice and swim out to sea. Aww. And that pretty much wraps the film up, leaving us with 1 dead squid, 2 dead sharks, and tons of dead humans, most of which we'll never know anything about or have any reason to care about. So, now that we've wrapped up the plot and covered just about everything there is to say, the big question, is the Meg 2 any good? Not really, but there are worse ways to kill an evening. I'd give it a mediocre 5 out of 10. There are definite highlights to the film, most especially the father-daughter relationship between Jonas and Mei Ying. Adoptive parenthood doesn't always get enough respect from Hollywood, but the dynamic here is presented in a way that is very sweet, loving, and genuinely heartwarming to see. It humanizes Statham's character very well, while also allowing Shuya Sophia Kai to develop her own character very naturally. The supporting cast of heroes is also very good, with just about everyone pulling their own weight in one way or another. But then there are the cons, which are pretty constant and notable. The villains are dreadful and seem to serve exclusively as plot devices more than functioning characters. They take up a lot of screen time which could have been better spent building up the Kraken and the Megs, of course. And speaking of the film's creatures, I found the CGI to be very bizarre in this movie. There were moments where it looked really, really good, but several times I stopped and said, oh wow, that's really bad. Most especially when the sea monsters start walking on land. I'm not usually the type to notice bad CGI, so if it stuck out to me, others are definitely going to notice it. Then there's the issue of the film's plot, which seems fine enough on paper, but ultimately it just doesn't work in execution. The start is too slow, the villains are too boring, and for a movie about giant killer sharks, the sharks aren't featured nearly enough. I also don't necessarily love how the Megs and the Kraken killed indiscriminately without any logical reasoning. I mean, they do eventually get full, right? But I've already watched the first movie, so I wasn't expecting authentic creature behavior here, and in defense of the films, it would have been a very, very boring film if they actually acted like real sharks. Still, it took me out of it a few times because, my goodness, these beasts are rogue to the point of making Bruce from Jaws look really tame. So, in conclusion, no, the film is not good, but it is an alright summer blockbuster, and if you're a fan of dumb fun, I think there's enough here to warrant buying a ticket. Just don't go in with real expectations. But that's gonna do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this one. This is a break from our usual content in the channel, but I do think we're going to start doing movie reviews for every horror and horror adjacent film that comes to theaters. I've been wanting to mix up the content just a little bit now, but for those of you who might be worried about it, don't worry, we're not moving away from Dead by Daylight. This is just something new that we're adding on top of the existing DVD content. So I'm gonna keep doing DVD stuff, but you can expect reviews for Saw and The Exorcist and The Nun too, and all these films that are coming out. So I hope you enjoy. Take care wherever you are. Let me know if you've seen The Meg, did you like it? And if you haven't seen it, are you planning to watch it? Either way, I've been Das Food. Hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and until next time, bye friends.